importantly noting the word total, that implies there are multiple happinesses, and this is therefore not, well, at least one might presume, individual happiness, since you have to add them together and that makes total happiness, so maybe you can quantify it in some way anyway, or maybe I'm crazy, right? Maybe my dad and the whole field of statistics and happiness statistics is completely crazy, I don't know. But sometimes it might be necessary in order to maximize total happiness to have rules that might, for example, determine which debates you get to run in which rounds, based on which motions are set. And then maybe you can't just follow your own individual whim and your supposed right to run libertarian cases whenever you want to, if that harms others. We believe the government should seek to intervene, prevent people doing that when it harms maximum total happiness. I feel the audience in this room will agree with me at this particular point. Right. So I'm going to talk about why the maximization of happiness, or as it's also known, Greg, utility, is the only rational way of justifying policy, and any justification of policy that doesn't rely on maximizing utility or happiness is irrational. I'm also going to talk briefly about things to do with libertarians, right? So let's get this stuff out of the way first. So there is a total lack of engagement, right, with what Ben just said about why it is frequently not utile, right? It does not benefit the majority of people to impose these systems when they haven't come up on their own, right? There isn't any engagement with the notion of why the sudden imposition of an equality of opportunity, where that isn't what people believe in, might create problems. Whether that might create practical problems in terms of people leaving or evading taxes, which means you don't actually end up with more tax, you don't actually end up therefore with more services, but also you might just create enormous resentment that might undermine the fabric of the state, right? It doesn't react to any of these things. Also, first government need to deal with, it's not just good enough to say that people in the United States are not happier. If it were true that they were happier than in Cuba, they need to engage in a situation in which if people in America are happier, that some of them die, right, where some people die, but they nonetheless feel that the majority of people are much happier than Cuba, they still would impose a Cuban-style system of equality of opportunity, even if that made people less happy, because they think stopping poor people dying is more important than the maximum total happiness. They really need to engage with the possibility that what first government was saying was true, and not just claim that it necessarily was made up. Whether or not it is, but they at least needed to consider the possibility that it might be true, or a situation in which it was true, and tell us even why then we shouldn't do it. Secondly, we had a number of things in opposition that sound radically like they might have been arguments in another debate for government. Right, that we should intervene because it maximizes total happiness, right? The purpose of government is to make everyone better off. We shouldn't adopt bad policies when they don't maximize total happiness. There presumably are some class of policies, right, where the harm to people is sufficiently serious, right, that they are bad policies, but you still are doing them, right? You're doing them because you think certain rights are useful. So you're not just protecting Aboriginal rights when they maximize total utility, noting that the majority of people feel happier in a society where everyone is protected and no one is persecuted on the basis of their birth, right? Given that lots of people get a lot of utility from rights protections, you need to tell us why we should protect these rights even when they're not utile, right? So when, for example, Aboriginal land rights harm a society, if you think they have some objective value, why you should still preserve them even when that harms everyone, even given that everyone likes having some land rights. Yeah.
You said there are rules the government can apply, like utilitarianism, in order to achieve total happiness. That would be a fine position. But your opening government said that you cannot quantify happiness, and therefore the government should butt out of people's lives.
Okay, I agree. I agree that first government said this. As my right as the second government team, I'm talking about the motion. I believe that we will win this debate. The government should win debates if they prove that the motion is true. Opposition should win debates if they prove the motion is false or should not be adopted. I am choosing to take the option to defend the motion. I think I'm also defending first government, but even if it's true that I'm not defending first government, I think I certainly am defending the motion and the text as written. Right, so we believe the government's, why is it that we believe that the maximisation of utility by governments is the only rational position? Right, because where do these things come from that Greg talks about, except from utility? What is the value of liberty? Right, what is the value of freedom? What is the value of choice? What is the value of fairness? Except that we prefer to live in a society which is fair. right? That we remove some harms which go on people, right? Which and therefore minimise total harms by removing some unfairness, right? Give everyone some things that are useful. Like usually it's the case that the small amount of tax required that everyone has the opportunity, right, means that you maximise total happiness, right? That's why we remove unfairness. That's why we make sure that everyone has an opportunity, right? That's why we deal with things like birth lotteries, right? But what they need to tell us is why we should do those things even when it doesn't maximise total happiness, at least in some cases, right? Why we should hold on to the notion of absolute rights or strong rights even when they hurt happiness, right? Why liberty might be more important, why this notion of liberty would be more important. We would also like a response to what Ben said. Where do rights come from, if not from happiness? Do they come from God? Do they come from some objective whole reality? Do they come from space? Right? Do they come from some natural law? What is the basis of any right except that it promotes the good for the largest number of people? Right? We think as on the side of government, what we need to do, what we have done, is merely to demonstrate that the only rational position, the only thing we can really be sure about, is that happiness exists, that utility exists, that people gain value from things, and that we should only pursue policies which get the most people the most value. We shouldn't have things like a right to bear arms, where it isn't utile, right? If the right to vote, if democracy is harmful, we shouldn't have it. If freedom is harmful, we shouldn't have it, right? If it were true that society that was freer was much less happy, then we should abolish freedom in order to gain maximum happiness. So people get quite a lot of happiness from freedom, so it's unlikely we're doing that, but we would be happy to do that if it was necessarily true that would maximise the happiness for everyone, right? So I stand very proudly behind the notion that this House believes all government policy should follow a strict logic of maximising total happiness.